Michael, is there a version of this in which Donald Trump finally sees that he's won, if he has won, and he doesn't, in his next speech, have to try to win votes by being inflammatory? And that's not part of his next speech, if he has won. Is there anyone there, and is there a part of Donald Trump that could hear the advice of, now is the time to do everything you can to not sound threatening to anyone?
I think there is, and I think this is where, if this thing plays out with one state to go, this is where Kellyanne Conway in his ear will be very, very important, because the first most important thing you do when you're running for president is to select your vice presidential. The second is on the night you win and you address the nation, because that then gives some clues, not on policy, not on any of that stuff, but on how you want to bring the country together, to your point, Maria, bring people together and have people realize, okay, this vote was worth it. I think he can do that. I hope he can do that. He needs to do that.
Well, he needs to, because I think right now, otherwise we're going to have a Brexit moment where all of a sudden people have sticker shock and they're like, oh, shoot, what happened? Because it's not just that we're giving him the White House, the Senate, the Congress, but also the Supreme Court.
Brian, back to you. I think the moment of truth for Donald Trump tonight, if he gives a speech and hears chants of lock her up, what does President-elect Trump say in the face of chants of lock her up?
Among so many questions at 1:25 a.m. Eastern Time, so much we don't know yet. Steve Kornacki has come to an understanding with his technology. They've reached a working agreement. You all right?
Well, we'll see if he can hold up his end of the deal here, this big board. I'm going to have some words after this show tonight. So, look, exit polls here. We talked about this a lot in the run-up to this election, that split among white voters, college, non-college. We can tell you two things about that tonight, though. First of all, look, we said those early exit polls we showed you might change. They did a little bit. Donald Trump did better than we were initially telling you he did among white voters with a college degree. He wins by 4 points. Now, this is down from Romney by 14, but I have to say, this is a lot better than people thought Donald Trump was going to do with white voters with a college degree. They returned to the Republican fold in the stretch in this campaign. That's what it looked like. The other thing, non-college whites, that number tonight is 39. It was 26 4 years ago. Here's the other thing raising eyebrows. Again, we said we were keeping an eye on the Latino vote. As we've gotten more into the exit poll, now we can tell you, look at this. This is a surprise to a lot of people. Clinton wins the Latino vote 65-29 tonight. I just want you to remember, 4 years ago, the margin was Obama 71, Romney 27. That was a 44-point spread. Tonight, the margin, you're seeing, it's only 36 points. It's actually gone down in 4 years. Republicans did 8 points better tonight with Latino voters net than Mitt Romney did 4 years ago. Now, think about that in the context of this campaign, where all of the conventional wisdom said that number, that 27, was only going to go down. It was going to be somewhere in the teens. According to our exit poll, Donald Trump lands 2 points higher than Mitt Romney did, loses by 8 points less than Mitt Romney did with the Latino vote. But make no mistake about it, when you see the states on this path to 270 that Donald Trump is carving tonight, what's doing this for Donald Trump? It's the white vote. 4 years ago, people were saying after the election, no Republican could go higher than Mitt Romney did. Donald Trump's proven you can.
You know, on this Hispanic number two, it's fascinating because you're right. Donald Trump, if that number holds, he's doing better than Mitt Romney did with Latino voters. He's still doing worse than John McCain did with Latino voters. And the way he's making up for that, the way that isn't a fatal number, is by spiking the white vote. This is something that I talked about at the very beginning of the night, Chris, and you said you disagreed with me on it. But I do feel like a lot of the really ragged racial edge of what Donald Trump has proposed was designed to change the behavior of white people, to tap into a type of white vote, an enthusiasm among white voters that was going to obliterate anything you might otherwise need to get from people of color. I mean, we do have Clinton underperforming Barack Obama with Latinos. We have Clinton underperforming Barack Obama with African Americans, although that was expected. What we've got, though, the biggest number and the biggest thing that explains how Trump could maybe win the presidency with only 29% of the Latino vote is that he's spiked white vote. He has figured out a way to do that. And that has always been the far right's dream, that you could figure out a way to do it without minorities. In fact, you could figure out a way to do it on the backs of minorities by threatening minorities in a way that make a lot of people uncomfortable, but that does awaken something basically that's racial anxiety among whites. And that's how you win. That's been a dream on the far right. It's the Ann Coulter dream of white turnout.
Well, let me give the other version of that notion.
The way he did it was the
way he did it.
Part of how he did it.
I have two tasks. Give me three. Number one, it took Joe Biden to call LaGuardia a third world airport. And then you saw Governor Cuomo trying to decide how to react to that. And that's like amateur now, calling LaGuardia a third world airport. We'll decide that. Casey Hunt has some reporting, and Mike Murphy joins us in the newsroom. Casey, what did you just learn?
Well, I mean, one thing I've been doing tonight is reaching out to people who worked for Bernie Sanders because they feel like they, learned a lot of lessons from their campaign. And I'm told Bernie and Jane Sanders themselves very saddened by what appears to be a looming Donald Trump win. Obviously, we haven't called that yet. And everyone that worked for them, for the most part, very upset about it. But there's a little bit of an element of I told you so, that you didn't pay attention to what was going on, that you didn't kind of embrace Bernie Sanders' ideas and approach early enough, and that it's cost them.
Mike Murphy, you've been politely listening to all of this. Was surprised to hear Michael Steele in the last conversation, and I see him, I'll raise this with him, say that the pollsters essentially got this right. They essentially did not get this right. We're covering a story that no one saw coming.
Well, my crystal ball's been shattered into atoms here because I predicted the exact opposite of what happened. But I'm a typical, campaign consultant type that we've been living and dying by data for a long time. And tonight, data kind of died. The exit polls originally were off. The polling beforehand, the most credible polling, was off. And Trump has built kind of a new model here. And I think it had two parts. One is he had resonant issues. People want to change. They want to punish politics. And I agree with some of the stuff Chris said about how the working middle class has had it. And this is how they riot. They vote for people that the establishment thinks are irresponsible. But the other half, and we can't miss this, is what a big generic Republican wave it was. There was a real repudiation of Hillary Clinton and I think the Obama third term. It needed two pieces to be such a different kind of thing, and I think they were both very, very powerful. So there's going to be a lot of soul searching should Trump win, and looking at the numbers, I think that's more likely than not in the Democratic Party as well as in the Republican establishment.
What did the prairie fire of Bernie Sanders and the prairie fire of Donald Trump have in common?
They had a lot in common within that universe of primary voters because they both told people of different demographies who believed basically the American dream was not in a good position for them. They may not ever achieve it, that there was an enemy. With Bernie, it was, Wall Street, the money's in a vault, you ought to get it, you can get that PhD in yoga for free. With Trump, it was to the machinist in Detroit who is seeing jobs that they worked 20 years to get that are high-wage jobs leave the country. And so the enemy is Mexico and foreigners who are taking your jobs. Both were selling grievance politics with different kind of resentment to people who had lost faith in the American dream and have been through a lot of economic pain. It comes from a real place. I'm from Detroit. I have relatives who, see the machine tools they worked on dismantled and put on freight cars to Mexico.
How much of the blame when Clinton supporters look to blame things or people, how much of the blame do you think Governor Johnson correctly will get?
I think the third-party people will be in for some blame from both, but the forces were bigger than that. That's a tactical thing. But Hillary Clinton was brutally repudiated tonight, and Donald Trump's most populist arguments, rough as they were embraced.
He's arguing there that both were grievance politics candidates, sure, but they were selling grievance politics. They were also selling authenticity, and they were selling, telling people something that was real and not something that was packaged. And I don't think we should forget we spent the last few months of this campaign reading through the emails of somebody who is essentially exposing just how, blow by blow, Hillary Clinton comes to decide where is she going to be on the Trans-Pacific Partnership? What is she going to say? Instead of seeing, oh, this is somebody who believes very strongly that globalization is a force for good, or that she doesn't, and she thinks it's a force that's decimating the economy. I think people are rejecting that as well in this.
Which is, hats off to the Russian government, right? I mean, if we were all combing through the email chains amid all the different Trump campaign forces, trying to figure out how they came up with some of his policies and got him to say some of the things that he said, would also have been a blow to his apparent authenticity. That is something that didn't happen because WikiLeaks only went after Clinton.
On the other hand, though, it also simply told voters what they felt they already knew about Hillary Clinton.
Right. Telling voters that something surprising is potentially even more fatal, right?
A break for us. When we come back, we're going to check in with Katie Tur at Trump headquarters. We have two campaigns in kind of a suspended animation, a holding pattern. One campaign, unlike the other, expecting to have some very good news when tonight is out. There is Trump headquarters, New York Hilton, 6th Avenue, not far from here, Midtown Manhattan. Clinton headquarters, a far, far different picture over at the Jacob Javits Convention Center on the west side of Manhattan. Our coverage will continue after a break. We are back, two very different evenings at two very different headquarters, and in a way, kind of mirror reflections of the ethos of those two campaigns. The Make America Great red hats have been distributed in the Hilton Ballroom in New York. The American flags behind the teleprompter with the Trump-Pence placard in front of the podium. On the west side of Manhattan, inside the glass-ceilinged Jacob Javits Convention Center, which almost bore the name Donald Trump, were it not for some last-minute construction maneuvering back in the day. There's the lectern. Again, this looks like night 3 at the Democratic Convention. Elaborate, huge staging. They were, candidly, expecting a victory celebration, down to what was once a plan for fireworks over the Hudson River, since canceled when cooler heads prevailed a few days back after that plan became public. Katie Tur is at Trump headquarters, having covered the Trump campaign for these 510 days, if I read your Twitter feed correctly today, Katie.
Yeah, I think I've done about 500 days with the Trump campaign. Donald Trump is said to be wanting to come out. He's itching to come out and address the crowd and give his speech. But he is, I'm told by a senior source, awaiting the allocation of 270 electoral votes. I just want to remind people a little bit about Donald Trump at this late hour and what the questions that still are outstanding about him. We still have not seen Donald Trump's taxes. There are still questions surrounding his business and how he would deal with the potential conflict of interest. He's talked about a blind trust going to his kids, but that technically is not really a blind trust. There's also still questions surrounding his relationship with Russia. These are all things that are unanswered at this time. And he also has not addressed directly, at least in recent months, what he would do about his Muslim ban. He's called it banning Muslims or extremists from territories or states where there is radical Islam. That number is quite high if you consider countries like France, which have had attacks on their soil, even attacks here in the U.S. It's unclear how that would happen. He has been talking about what he calls extreme vetting, even potentially a Muslim registration, which we haven't heard him completely rebuke. He also has said that he's going to build his wall. We all know this. But he said he would end Obamacare in his first 100 days in office by executive order. He has said he would rip up the Iran deal. These are things that are hard to do alone, but it's increasingly looking like he's going to have the House and potentially the Senate on his side. And if he makes a run with the rest of the states that are on the electoral map right now, you could essentially argue that he has a mandate. So how his first 100 100 days in office would shape up to be is certainly an open question. There's also the question of who would occupy his cabinet. In the last few days, those talks have been ongoing and more earnest than they had been before. Donald Trump refusing to take part in those talks out of superstition. But the names that we heard, and these are just very preliminary names, and obviously nothing is set in stone, and these names could be something that don't ever come to be. But Newt Gingrich as Secretary of State, Rudy Giuliani as Attorney General, Reince Priebus maybe as Chief of Staff. There's even rumors out there that Corey Lewandowski could head up the RNC. That would show how disconnected the Republican Party has come with its base and how they would want to completely change direction. Of course, all of this is very preliminary, and there's still a lot of work to be done. This transition had been head up by Governor Chris Christie, but he has sort of faded into the background in recent months. Now we're told that Jeff Sessions has taken a larger role. We're going to find out what they will be doing in this next 3 months. After all, Donald Trump hasn't been involved in these talks. You can hear the crowd behind me. They are obviously very excited for Donald Trump to take the stage. They are chanting right now, call it, call it. They're watching Fox News. They believe that this race is over. They just want to hear it.
Katie Tur, thank you. It'll take us years to discuss all that needs to be talked about coming out of tonight. We have a call on the Missouri Senate race. It's really attracted so much attention. The Democrats thought they could eke out a pickup this race, as I was saying earlier, on pure technical grounds. Probably gave us the craftiest ad of this campaign. The gentleman on the right, Jason Kander, the Democrat who has gone down in defeat, showed that he could assemble an AR-15 blindfolded, as countless members of the U.S. Armed Forces and law enforcement can do. But it was about guns as an issue in this race, and one ad does not a Senate race or a wave election make. And so it's a net hold for the Republicans. But Mr. Blunt, the veteran Republican from Missouri, always an interesting political state, is going back to the Senate. Steve Kornacki, having forged an alliance with his technology, is back at the board. Steve?
Me and this thing after the show.
Take it out back, yeah.
Okay, so we planted this seed earlier. We talked about, look, to be elected president, it's all about the Electoral College. Make that very clear. But we are also keeping track of the national popular vote, and I think this is at least worth pointing out. Let's put on the screen right now what the national popular vote is at this moment. You see Donald Trump with a lead there over Hillary Clinton of about 1.2 million votes. However, most of the vote that is outstanding on this map right now, it's heavily tilted toward the West Coast, more specifically toward the state of California. Look, this is an easy Clinton win, but here's the thing. California, obviously, it's gigantic. Only about a third of the vote is in California right now, and you see Hillary Clinton is already leading by 1.2 million votes. Now, Barack Obama's margin over California 4 years ago, and Clinton is on pace to match or maybe even exceed that margin. His margin was north of 3 million votes. So we are likely to tack on an additional 2 million votes to this margin for Hillary Clinton. Remember what I just showed you. Hillary Clinton's losing the national popular vote now by 1.2 million votes. Now, there are places on this map where Donald Trump's going to gain votes. We still have votes coming in Idaho, in Utah, and Alaska. These are smaller places. We also have votes coming in Washington State, where Hillary Clinton's winning big, in Oregon, where she's winning big. So I said earlier I was planting a seed, now getting a little bit more serious about it. The last time we saw this was in the year 2000. Al Gore won the popular vote in the year 2000 by about 500,000 votes. And of course, in that Supreme Court decision, lost the state of Florida, lost the Electoral College, lost the presidency. Now, 16 years later, certainly as these numbers come in, the possibility is alive of Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote tonight, but losing the Electoral College and then losing the presidency.
If Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote tonight, even if she doesn't win the presidency, that will mean Democrats have won the popular vote in 6 out of the last 7 elections. It's the first time the Democratic Party has ever pulled that off in the history of the current 2 parties that we've got. The last time it was pulled off was by the Republican Party in the era of the formation of the Republican Party, like 1860 to 18 1988. If Clinton wins the popular vote, and those California numbers that Steve was just saying suggest that will be true, this will also be the second time in recent memory where a Democrat wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College.
So much talk tonight about the pollsters. Perhaps you may have heard this talk. Perhaps you may have participated in it. I am told Lawrence O'Donnell, in his Insider segment, has more than one pollster inside a room tonight. We're going to lock the doors until you get some answers, Lawrence.
We've got a couple here to confess, Brian. We have Bill McInturf, who is a Republican pollster. We have Fred Yang, who's a Democratic pollster. Bill, let's start with you. What did the polls get right? What did they get wrong?
Well, what they got right was the shape and the contour of this race. What they got wrong is the margins. So, for example, in all of our polling, we showed Trump ahead 25 points with white non-college, about what Romney got, except he won by 35 tonight. That's a net 10 points extra. They're 34% of the vote. That's 3.4% more of the whole electorate. Then the other change is that Trump did much better tonight with white women college plus. He lost them, but he lost them by single digits. And most of the public polling, he's been losing by literally 15 or 20 points. But it's a reminder, like these margins in rural America where he won by 62-34, that campaigns are about margins. And at the margin, because of margins, it's reshaping the map in the Midwest and reshaping the presidency.
But, Fred, all of these polls carry a margin of error, usually about 3 points, which means if it says Trump's at 44, he might be as high as 47, he might be as low as 41. Right. So it's really a band of possibility. Are the outcomes we're seeing tonight within that band of predicted possibility?
I would agree, yes. I think tacking on to what Bill said, I think that in the battleground states, which, because they're battleground states, they're 50-50 states, and today Mrs. Clinton was on the wrong end of 50-50. I think some of the margins that we saw in some of the earlier polling compared to 2012 just didn't bear out. She didn't do as well with Latinos. She didn't do as well with white women. She didn't do as well with millennials. She only won 18 to 29-year-olds by 17%. Barack Obama carried that group by 23%. So, I mean, look, I think there were a lot of polls, not every poll, a lot of polls converged to suggest that this would be a 2, 3, 4-point victory for Mrs. Clinton. As you pointed out, though, that's within the margin of error. And as Steve Kornacki pointed out, we could still have a situation in which she, quote-unquote, won the national poll, right? But because we have an electoral college system, she loses the election.
And, Bill, is there anything in the exit polls that you would see as the chief explainers of these outcomes?
I think the chief explains what I said, which is the margins by men and women who didn't graduate from college. These are extraordinary. He's in the mid-60s, and just to put this in perspective, he's winning today white non-college voters more than Ronald Reagan did in 1980 against Jimmy Carter. That's a huge deal.
Quick last word. Did the tools work? Is it within the margin of error, and therefore this is what the tools predicted?
I would argue that as we focus on the horse race aspect. Yeah. Even our last poll we conducted for NBC News and Wall Street Journal, there were a bunch of questions which suggested that this is an electorate wanting major change. I just think that we thought that Donald Trump was not that candidate to bring that change, and they've spoke tonight, and this country that wanted change.
That's why we count the votes. Brian, back to you.
Can I, Lawrence, I'm going to ask you a question to put to those guys, sure, which is what Rachel asked about a couple hours ago, which is a great question. If this was a change vote where people said throw the rascals out, how come they didn't throw the rascals out? We haven't heard tonight of any massive defeat of incumbents in the House or the Senate. So why just pick him, but keep the usual tongue together of the establishment?
Great question. Fred, you were just talking about that it indicated this was a change election. But what happened to all these incumbents who got reelected?
I'm sorry. Change never means change. It means change the party in power. The Democrats have been in power for 8 years. The president himself...
Why doesn't it mean change the senator in power?
It never never does. And every time, every wave off your election, when they say we want change, I'm sorry, you know what it changes? The party in power. And despite President Obama's good standing tonight and his own approval, they've been there a long time. She offered more of the same, and people said no. I think the other thing to remember tonight is in most polling, there was 10 to 12% between third and fourth party vote or undecided. Well, third party vote dropped as always. They tipped Republican. And again, to Nate Silver's credit, when Silver kept saying, there's about a 30% chance this guy can win, because there's a lot more slide than there are in most polls. This is why he did a nice job representing all the time. I'm sorry, there's about a 30% chance we're going to see a President Trump. And tonight, you flip the coin 10 times, and we got one out of the three.
And how many late deciders were there? Because there's so much happening the last 11 days with regard to the FBI, where you had a big turn against Hillary in terms of what the news was, then a turn of relief back to her very recently, right before the election. Did that affect the voting, can you tell?
Fred.
Well, Chris, in the exit polls, 13% of the electorate in the exit polls said they decided in the last week or more recently. And among that 13%, they voted for Trump by 5 points. 47-42, and another 9% going to the third-party candidates. So I think, Mrs. Clinton's margin was predicated in some respects with the third and fourth-party candidates. And it's interesting, in the exit polls, groups where she did well with also had a higher share of the third and fourth party vote than groups she didn't do well with. And I think that just goes to the change argument. And the final thing I want to say about the change argument is there's another neat item in the exit poll. 17% of the American public said they wanted a president whose policies would be more liberal than Barack Obama's, 17%. And among that cohort, they voted for Hillary Clinton by big margins, but by only 70 to 23. In other words, 23% of voters who said they wanted a president whose policies more liberal than Donald Trump, but then Barack Obama, voted for Donald Trump.
And we had a very significant percentage of Trump voters saying in exit polls they don't think he has the right temperament to be president.
Well, today they had to make a choice. 18% of the folks said they didn't like either candidate. That's 3 times the normal amount. Trump won those people 49-29.
Of the ones who didn't want either candidate,
right?
Trump won them
49-29, which again to me represents what we're trying to say is I'm sorry. Here's an artsy line. De Tocqueville in Democracy in America said, Americans are the only people in the world who would build a dream house and move before the roof is finished. It's very hard to get a third term for one party. It doesn't happen very often. It's harder still in modern America.
Brian, back to you.
All right, Lawrence. Boy, so much there to think about. And, of course, all of us know these gentlemen, McInturf and Yang and Peter Hart. We've hung on every word they've said on so many conference calls leading up to this election. We knew something was coming. We knew something was brewing. Someone tonight called Donald Trump the shiny vehicle of change. This change was coming. They were going to hop on a car, get in it, and go.
The new car smell.
Yeah, that's right. That was 2 years ago.
That was Obama in 2014.
Hey, let's record keep on this Senate race in Pennsylvania. We've talked about Pennsylvania so much, and the incumbent is going back. Pat Toomey. Chris Matthews is shaking his head
because of all the predictions I got from the experts up there. Toomey, but I did get a good call from, and James knows this Pennsylvania very well. He's won many races up there. People like Rendell, the governor, would say, who works with us now, said that Hillary would have to win by 4 for her to get in. She would be the coattails to bring her in. But Pennsylvania is in a mood right now. I can tell you, I talked to my brother. He said all these people showed up at the polls he'd never seen before in Montgomery County. And he said they're older than he'd ever seen at the polls. And they were all concerned, conservatives, about the Supreme Court. So Trump going in there on guns and the Supreme Court issue at the very end, we may not appreciate that in New York or in Washington, but up there, it taps something. And they said, I'll even put up with Trump, who I consider immoral and awful, to get my court protected.
It does, this is a really important moment for the Supreme Court, and the Republicans made a really radical decision when Antonin Scalia died that President Obama would not be allowed to even have his proposed nominee considered. I do think that it's now I think that Roe versus Wade is at risk. I think that with Republicans in control of the House and the Senate and likely the White House, that means, as James said earlier, that Obamacare, they've got everything in place to repeal it. They've got everything in place they need to repeal Dodd-Frank. They've got everything in place they need to do whatever Trump wants to do on immigration, which I do not think will be immigration reform or anything that we've seen that looks like that. So they've got, I mean, I think Roe versus Wade has never been more at risk than it will be with President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence there lighting a fire under that issue and a Supreme Court theirs to pave the way they want.
I have to interrupt here just to say Kristen Welker standing by at Clinton headquarters to talk to us. Kristen, am I correct that we're going to hear from John Podesta, assumed from the podium?
Well, here's what we know, Brian. He is headed over here. What's significant about that is that the Clinton campaign has largely gone dark for well over an hour now. Let me just take you through what happened. He was at the Peninsula Hotel here in New York watching returns with Secretary Clinton. He started to leave the hotel, encountered reporters who asked him for reaction to the results so far. He didn't have any. And then they said, are you going over to the Javits Center? Yes, he is coming here. But he did not say whether or not he was going to actually speak. We anticipate we will hear from him. That would make sense. He is not, or he did not indicate that Secretary Clinton would be coming over with him. In fact, when he was asked directly, is Secretary Clinton coming to the Javits Center? He said, no, I am going. So this is significant again because there is movement from within the Clinton campaign headquarters, and we are going to, in some way, shape, or form, likely get some reaction from the chairman. Let me just set the scene here, Brian. Inside the Javits Center, a number of people have left in tears. There is stunned disbelief as these results, as they come in. Earlier in the evening, they were looking for any sign that there was a potential path forward. When the results of Nevada, for example, came in, the crowd burst into cheers. But now, really, it's just silence as they listen to the music playing and await to hear what happens next. Brian.
Kristen Welker at Clinton headquarters. James Carville has joined us. I'm sorry?
No.
Maine. We have a projection. Maine. It is being projected by NBC News, will be won by Hillary Clinton when all the votes are cast. 3 out of the 4 electoral votes.
So that means we are not projecting the separate congressional district that...
No.
Okay.
Donald Trump gets 1.
Okay.
So you'll note his total has grown by 1. What a fascinating and confusing and terrific.
So, to be clear,
yes.
To be clear,
yeah.
Maine, one of the electoral votes in Maine goes to Trump. The remaining electoral votes in Maine go to Hillary Clinton.
We're working on a new graphic that says she gets most of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. I was saying that James Carville has been kind enough to join us out here in the studio. What are you hearing, James, on what has to be a confusing night for you as well?
Well, look, there was a forged, we're going to second guessing is part of this game. You know that from the beginning. If you don't want to be second guessed or criticized, don't be in politics. There was a huge argument leading up to the campaign that she needed a more economic message, that should acknowledge this. And people, on the other hand, said if we close with temperament and we have this massive GOTV effort, that will get us across the finish line. That wing of the campaign is going to get heavily criticized, to say the least, in the books and the articles and the obits and the go through thing. And if you would have told me that the Democrats would lose Texas by 8, win the popular vote, and lose the election, I would have said never. Okay, but that apparently is going to be what happens tonight. But where the second guessing is going to come in is that they kind of resisted the thing that there were multiple problems that the country was facing, that she thought she could attack them on a lot of different fronts, and Trump's message was simple and to the point. And that is going to be where a lot of the second guessing, that's going to be, we're going to be talking about a lot on television, a lot, and justifiably so.
Here's the chairman of the campaign, John Podesta.
Thank you. Well, folks, I know you've been here a long time. time. And it's been a long night, and it's been a long night, and it's been a long campaign. But I could say we can wait a little longer, can't we? We're still counting votes, and every vote should count. Several states are too close to call, so we're not going to have anything more to say tonight. So listen to me. Everybody should head home. You should get some sleep. We'll have more to say tomorrow. I want you to know, I want every person in this hall to know, and I want every person across the country who supported Hillary to know that your voices and your enthusiasm means so much to her and to Tim and to all of us. We are so proud of you. And we are so proud of her. She's done an amazing job, and she is not done yet. So thank you for being with her. She has always been with you. I have to say this tonight. Good night. We will be back. We'll have more to say. Let's get those votes counted, and let's bring this home. Thank you so much for all of you have done. You are in all of our hearts. Thank you.
A tough job for a guy whose life has been laid bare by a massive computer hack, who has had the difficult job of being chairman of this campaign. And there is how so many Hillary Clinton supporters are reacting in that room.
It's an interesting decision by the campaign to come out and say, go home, we're not going to say anything else tonight. I mean, it's true that there are 5 races that are either too close or too early to call. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Alaska. But they're not that far off from getting called. I mean, Pennsylvania's got 97% in, Michigan's 87, Wisconsin's 90, Minnesota's 89. What they're telling us is there's not going to be a speech tonight, and we are going to hit pause on this. You can expect that the Trump campaign will not do the same thing. This is the Clinton campaign saying we will have no response, we will have no word for you. We want the cameras off us now.
And the normal ritual is that the phone call is made. It's too early for that, of course, given the numbers are not in. Yeah. The normal ritual is the following sequence. The phone call is made by the loser to the winner. Then there's an announcement that there's a concession has been made. And then the winner comes out and speaks. So that sequence will not happen tonight.
Did Kerry wait till the next day?
He waited.
Yes, because Ohio, they thought it was
provisional ballots. I mean, look,
we're just getting later counts now, and it's harder to get the decision.
You know, it's just like a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of second guessing. I didn't know that John Podesta was that good of a speaker. That was a tough assignment he had to come out. That was not easy. I'll tell you. I didn't envy him, and I happen to think a lot of John. Personally, and my heart went out to him. You just couldn't watch him.
I think he looked good in the WikiLeaks. Nobody wanted it to happen, but every time I read one of these exchanges, he seemed like the grown-up. Well, he seemed good to me.
I think Casey Hunt raised such an interesting issue tonight. The chains of emails showing Hillary Clinton's position on an issue is the result of, 9 rounds of questioning internally. Donald Trump, during this campaign, took a whack at concussion policy, that we're getting soft on head injuries, just as an aside. But again, because everything is through the prism of followers, people would see that and say, he says what he thinks, and there's no filter. They didn't focus group concussion policy before he issued that snap
But they also had him. I mean, had we seen the sausage making behind some of his policy speeches, where he appeared to be announcing policies that we've never heard of, let alone
wasn't there something like 8 or 10 different things on the Puerto Rican debt crisis?
Yeah.
I mean, look, the campaign it'll be observed that it was a collaborative effort. She believed in getting a lot of different opinions, and there's going to be be some obviously going to be some second guessing, some criticism. When something like this happens, you know that's going to happen.
Yeah, but it wasn't an unusual way to make policy. I mean, to get to actually solicit various views, and does that mean it's not, you know?
Well, there was bound to be a sad people filing out of one of the headquarters picture tonight. It just happens to be the Clinton campaign and our modern-day security apparatus forcing crowds to walk around barriers for no apparent reason. Steve Kornacki is at the board with a look at Pennsylvania. Steve?
Well, here, actually, what we have here is you just heard the Clinton campaign saying we're not conceding. They say there's too much that's still outstanding. I want to explain exactly what the Clinton campaign is looking at here, exactly what our decision desk, other decision desks out there are looking at, why the Clinton campaign would make that declaration. To set the stakes here, we told you there are three basically must-win states for Hillary Clinton if she's going to pull this election out. They are Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. She trails in all three. Our decision desk has not called a single one of these states. Let me explain why. In Pennsylvania right now, Donald Trump's lead is 75,000 votes. There are approximately 65 precincts in the state of Pennsylvania that have yet to report their results tonight. Every single one of those precincts is either in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia suburbs, or Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is. So there is going to be an uptick in vote for Hillary Clinton there. My estimate is that would probably gain her about 20,000 votes. That would not be enough when you're facing 75,000 gap. Why is our decision desk still not calling Pennsylvania then? That is because there's also a large number of provisional ballots that were disproportionately cast, we believe, in Philadelphia that may take days to count. Estimate here is that it could be upwards of 3% of the statewide total cast provisionally. So there could still be counting in Pennsylvania. That's a lot to overcome. Potentially, though, there's a somewhat large pool of votes out there. Michigan is pretty straightforward, but Wisconsin's the other one I quickly want to focus on. Again, must win for Hillary Clinton. What's the gap here? You're looking at 85,000 votes. What is the reason our decision desk is not calling Wisconsin? It has to do with Milwaukee County, obviously the city of Milwaukee, big Democratic county. There's a lot of vote that's not in here. What this is absentee vote. We think maybe a quarter of the vote in Milwaukee County is going to be absentee. But here's the thing. We do not know the size of that absentee ballot, of the total universe of absentee ballots. We are waiting to get a read on that. Again, Clinton kind of has a mountain to climb here in Wisconsin, but our decision desk does not have a good sense of the absentee ballot situation in Milwaukee County. So we are not calling Wisconsin either. And so at this moment, our decision desk has not called Wisconsin. Clinton trails, has not called Michigan. You can see Hillary Clinton trails there by about 80,000 votes, and it has not called Pennsylvania. Hillary Clinton trails there as well. Clearly looks like a steep climb for her. She'd need all three. That's what it's come to.
Steve, thank you. It is a joy to watch you work with numbers and explain all of this. We're the recipients of it. It also strikes me we haven't explained our decision desk, but this is important. We'll get to that after we show you this decision. Lisa Murkowski, the incumbent, that's a net hold in Alaska. And here's what that means. The larger graphic, the Senate at this hour, Democrats +1, Republican control of the Senate. This is what we've been talking about all night. If Trump goes on to victory and the White House, if this holds as we believe it will, as our early evening projection of the House, Republican control holds as we think it will, all three branches. And so, as Chris Matthews and others have been talking about tonight, those people who were motivated to cast their vote for the Supreme Court, among other issues. And here's another projection. Alaska, we are projecting when all the votes are counted, we'll go to Donald Trump. 3 electoral votes. You think 3 electoral votes, small peanuts, don't matter? Look at what they do to your total when they push you up to 248 versus 218. A word about our national map. Here's the reds and the blues. And notice that landmass out in the Pacific with the Aleutian Islands trailing. Alaska has gone to Donald Trump. Hawaii has gone to Hillary Clinton, 218, 248. Can we take the shot of the decision desk? This is important. I know we've had an erosion in trust in our institutions, and I'm just asking you to believe me. Our decision desk in this building is they take place in their own world. They are not around any outside media. They don't have the pressure of knowing what other news organizations are making calls, that we're ahead or behind in certain races. This is as close as we can get to our director of elections and surveys and the decision process going on in that room. Because it is really serious business.
It looks like a failed moonshot room, doesn't it?
Yeah.
NASA.
I mean, they've got really hard work to do in terms of these last states, right? That you've got different news organizations taking different approaches to the very close races with the small amounts of different kinds of votes that remain outstanding. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure as we get closer and closer to 270. They are insulated from the pressure, literally, in the sense that they are not participating in discussions about what they are doing. They are not paying attention to what other news organizations are doing. They're doing things on their own terms, but they know exactly how close somebody is to winning this thing, and their work gets harder and harder as the night goes on. So you can see, as we are watching them, they're drinking coffee, but you can also see that at this point, it's really crunch time for them. This doesn't peter out; it crescendos right till the end.
Nicole Wallace has joined us. James Carville is here with us in the studio. Nicole, as you were coming into the room, we were watching John Podesta, the chairman. It's the equivalent of being sent out to pinch hit in the ninth inning of Game 7 in the rain.
Yeah, and listen, it's admittedly an extremely narrow path that Hillary Clinton has to the presidency, but no one should read anything into what John Podesta just did, because in 2004, Andy Card, who was the White House chief of staff, I believe or Mark Roscoe, who was the campaign chairman, a figure of equal stature to John Podesta on this campaign, went into a ballroom about that size at the Reagan Center and sent all of the Bush supporters home. All that he was acknowledging tonight was that there wouldn't be a result worth waiting around any longer for. So they look sad because they didn't get the result they wanted to, but that act, him sending everyone home, was simply an acknowledgement that they are not going to know in any sort of timely manner for those to justify those people waiting around. Is she probably going to come up short? I would guess she is. But what he did tonight was simply being sort of humane to people who've been sitting around probably since 4 or 5 o'clock.
Corollarily, what happens in the Hilton ballroom?
Well, I imagine they stay up for this. I mean, when it's going the other way, I think you stay up a little longer. I think where the Clinton campaign probably is, and you would know better than me, is perhaps looking at their options into Pennsylvania. I've heard some reports that they're asking questions about how that vote came in, if there are any irregularities that they,
You ask every question that you can ask. You talk to every lawyer you have. You talk to every kind of analyst that you have. I mean, look, it's hard that there's some avenue, however remote or narrow you think it is, that we're going to take a look at it and do that. And I think Nicole's point is right. Is you tell people to go home. It's not unprecedented in 2004, and I can't imagine the disappointment, the shock of, Secretary Clinton, President Clinton, the people in that room, a lot of people. Losing one of these things is really, really, really hard, and losing one that you think you're going to win is
and it's not unprecedented to wait till the next day. John Kerry conceded the next morning, and Bush held off on declaring victory. John Kerry held off on acknowledging defeat or conceding defeat. But it's just so wild that at 2:16 a.m. we're talking about whether Hillary Clinton will accept what looks like a result that might not go her way, when we all thought, we'd been talking since that dramatic debate moment, which I incorrectly called a lights out moment in American politics, when Donald Trump said he may not accept the result if he doesn't believe in it or doesn't like what he sees. So, I mean,
it's also remarkable that at 2:16 in the morning, as you say, Nicole, we've got 6 big states with lots of electoral votes that are all still too close to call.
Right.
I mean, that's also, I mean, the number of states that came in within a couple of points, within a point and a half, all over the country, whether or not, whatever that says about the determination of the final results, it's very, very, very close in a lot of these states, including all of the ones that are still outstanding.
A chunk of the electorate right there. Look at that.
In a human terms, candidates, all of them that are any good, including the Clintons, race to the last second with the last extra ounce of their energy. They're dead. They're exhausted beyond belief. It takes a month for some of these people to recover.
Yeah.
And so at the very moment the results come in, you know what it's like to be really tired. Your emotions are shot.
I've heard about it.
And you have to come out, and say, I lost, or even I won. I mean, we went through this with President Carter. I thought the reason nobody liked it, but he withdrew. You can see it early because I thought, and I don't know him that well. I like him and I respect him, but I think he did it because he didn't think he could hold it together later that night. I think he was so beat, and you're supposed to do it. You know, you have to do it. But I guess we're going to have a concession tomorrow. But maybe not. Maybe this is going to go
maybe
on.
not. You know what I mean? I think if you're going to do it, you want to be sure that you can, that you're sort of up. But you do owe it to your supporters, your donors, to everybody else to exhaust every possibility before you do that. I don't think it's unusual.
I just don't think anyone thought it would be her. Based on all the polls that showed her with a 3.5, ahead 3 to 5 points, that it would be her exhausting all of her.
No, they didn't. And people were very optimistic. I mean, you looked at the early vote. You looked at what was coming in. I was getting texts all day. In Broward, it was this. And in Johnson County, Iowa, wow, it was the biggest, turnout they've ever had. In Philadelphia, it turned out it didn't count on the other side. I don't know what the total vote is going to be, but it looks like it's going to be it was 127 million in 2012, and it feels like this is going to be north of 140 million, maybe. I mean, it's going to be a staggering number.
Isn't that strange to keep hearing from both sides? Big turnout today. Long lines in Fishtown and Philly. Yeah. Hours after closing time, still these millennials standing in line. And I heard that about the conservatives in the burbs too. I mean, people got into this election finally.
You always get the turnout numbers ultimately in the end. It often sometimes feels like it doesn't match the anecdotal information from there. Right. One of the things that I think will be interesting, particularly within Democratic politics, is see what this does to the strategizing around early vote. Because the Democrats love early voting, right? Democrats
have banking it.
They banked the vote, and that's a big part of how Barack Obama put together his 2 wins, was working that early vote to try to make sure that they could lock in people when they'd made their decision and get it done and get them off the table so you can focus your research on the people who haven't made it to the polls yet. In this case, you had a struck-by-lightning circumstance. If you believe in the Comey effect, you had a struck-by-lightning circumstance under which millions and millions and millions and millions of people, almost a third of the electorate, voted in the 9-day period between Jim Comey said, hey, Hillary Clinton might have, the equivalent of hemorrhagic fever, and 9 days later when he said, oh, actually, she doesn't. And in that time, if people had been thinking about the election but not voting, would the difference have been enough to push this 1.5 points and make a difference?
What is going to be studied in political science ad nauseum, ad infinitum, is the effect, or lack of effect, on the field organization on turnout. But it is acknowledged, and it's true, that the Clinton campaign had as fine an operation as you can possibly have.
Sterling
they had
ground game.
And it was a sterling ground game. And Trump had none. I mean, he didn't even put one together.
Let the RNC
so this is going to be.
Don't stop there. He didn't have he didn't really have any of the traditional jobs on a campaign either. He didn't have a traditional headquarters. It was the floor.
He didn't have TV ads. Yeah. I was watching all during the ball game, during the World Series. Hillary's ads were really good.
Yeah.
The little kids watching the bad language.
Really
I thought this
good.
was dynamite stuff. The imitation of the Daisy ad, the bringing back of the Daisy actress. I mean, everything worked. Trump had,
look, they had arguably the most successful convention in modern political history. They, according to Nate Silver, they won the debates by more than any candidate had ever won the 3 debates. And you had 100 million people, 90 million people watching the debate. I mean, if you took the execution of things that we as commentators or political consultants or something, the markers that we said that you had to do, I mean, they hit their markers. I mean, field organization, contacts, you name it.
And the parallel to that is the Republican primary, the $100 million that Mike Murphy spent trying to do the Jeb Bush super PAC effort. You look at the organizational effort of so many of those establishment candidates who went up against Donald Trump, who didn't lose because they ran terrible campaigns or because they didn't get their act together. They did. It just didn't matter.
It was a depressing convention.
The Trump convention.
They did not
Remember
have
the
a great
first night
convention. They didn't have a unified
people were
party.
still speaking after everybody went home?
Peter Alexander is at Trump headquarters with some news about Donald Trump. Peter?
Hey, Brian, we can now report that Donald Trump is here at the Hilton in Midtown, just about a block away from Trump Tower. He has just arrived. And we've also heard now in a tweet that just came out from the head of communications at the RNC, Sean Spicer, quote, Donald Trump about to take the stage at the Hilton in New York. The crowd here has been frustrated, frankly frustrated at the media for not calling this race at this point. It's not unusual for us to be heckled by Trump supporters, but we didn't think it would happen here on this night, turning to the reporters and saying, call it, and yelling some obscenities to go with it as well. But the news, most importantly, is that Donald Trump has finally arrived here at the campaign election night headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, and that we are told he will be taking the stage shortly.
All right, Peter Alexander, thank you. It is a very short distance between those two locations. Coming to work today, I saw these filled with sand New York City Department of Sanitation dump trucks that now ring the entrance to Trump Tower, given our modern-day security concerns.
But a bollard is not enough.
And this portion of Midtown Manhattan is under lockdown, depending on the block.
Nicole Wallace, you were just talking about the precedent in 2004 when on the Bush side of the campaign, you had a campaign bigwig come out, tell everybody to go home. We're not going to get a result tonight. And then we got the concession from Kerry the next day. In terms of what Trump is about to do here, if Sean Spicer from the RNC is right, and Trump is about to take the stage when, by all media accounts, and certainly by ours, he has not hit 270. Right. If he is going to give a speech tonight, what's the right context here?
Listen,
what's the right way to do that?
Well, it isn't the right thing to do, but he isn't a normal guy. I mean, Mike McCurry and I were the back channels on the two campaigns. He was sort of back channeling with the Kerrys and the Edwards on that night, and I was talking to the president and vice president and Karl Rove, and what Mike McCurry said is that he thought he was going to be president all day, and he understands now that he isn't.
Kerry thought that.
But the Edwards haven't come around yet, so just give him to the morning. Give him to the morning. And there were some people in the president's circle who wanted him to do just this, to claim his victory. And the president said, no. You know what? I trust Mike McCurry. I trust that I'm getting the straight story. Let's sleep on it. And he goes, he said to me, we better call in the morning. And I was, 26. I had no business probably being this back channel between the two campaigns. But he did just that. He stood down. And that was when we sent our supporters home. And the next morning, I remember Bush called from the Oval Office at about 6:30. Dan Bartlett called. He goes, he's getting a little antsy. And Bush was always antsy and always up early. The call didn't come in quite as early, but by 10 o'clock, John Kerry had kept his word and had called and conceded. But it would not have happened that smoothly, I don't think. We understood that it would have agitated efforts on the Kerry-Edwards side if Bush had gone out and done just this, sort of claimed his victory. So, but it's very, I wouldn't expect Trump to do anything different.
Do you think that Trump is going to take the stage tonight and going to actually claim victory?
I mean, I don't know what else he'd be there to do.
Well, what's he going to say? Hey, well, why would he do anything by precedent?
Why would he?
Yeah, why all of a sudden now he's just going to start like doing?
Everybody keeps telling me he's not going to do any of the things he campaigned on. That he's going to be a normal Republican now. I don't know. I don't see that. I don't see it that way. I'm trying to adjust my way of thinking to this new normalizing of Donald Trump that we're supposed to be doing.
Rachel, I have never tried to normalize Donald Trump. I didn't, I have been forthcoming. We've had a national conversation about my 15 months of therapy. I mean, I didn't vote for him. But I am just dismayed and sort of stunned that he continues to defy every convention in politics.
He has one pressure on him, which you've been talking about all night, this future Dow. The fact that there's this world markets roiling, going crazy, he has got the responsibility, probably if he wins, to deal with that. So that's a reality he has to deal with. And I think he may come out tonight just say, I'm not as crazy as I look.
I don't know how he feels about that responsibility. He may look at that number, the Dow with those Dow futures down 800 and think, good.
How come? How can he say that?
They'll say markets go up, markets go down, and once people see what a tremendous guy I am, all kinds of things that
His closing argument had a picture
everybody knows.
Has a picture of Janet Yellen and Lloyd Blankfein and talking about and George Soros talking about the global elites who are working against you, as if there is a conspiracy of global elites, which is the Clintons and some powerful Jewish people, that is out to take your country away, and I'm going to give it back. I don't think a guy like that worries about the markets being down on account of him. I think he takes it as a badge of honor.
What do we think that they're going to do with interest rates in December now that's happening? I mean, look at those things you can utterly forget about. The people who actually believe that climate is a real serious issue. We're out of all of those things.
Oh, yeah.
That's over and done with.
Climate change is a hoax invented by the Chinese.
Right.
Chris Matthews, I'm sitting here rewinding the last couple of days because there's going to be, as James correctly points out, the kind of obituary of all obituaries written about this. Trying to reconstruct the signs that were out there and the people who said something. On your show, some people came up to this line saying, I predict Andrew Sullivan. I remember Andrew Sullivan being very declarative on Thursday night or Friday night's broadcast. I aggressively questioned Mark Halperin, who was seeing various paths to victory for Donald Trump. Where are you getting these paths? Here we are. Here we are.
I heard it from a friend of mine, Ed Jesser, up in Dorchester, who's the smartest pal I know. Protocol knows him, and he always tells me what's going on. He's been saying this for days, that Trump's going to win, and I, of course, do what everybody else does. I think it's very close to the Titanic. This kind of situation where even God himself cannot sink this ship. I mean, everybody agreed, and that he was going to lose because he made all those mistakes. He had no ad campaign on television. He had no ground game. He said things that were derisive to a quarter of the population. He did it over and over again. People weren't going to vote for him, and they did. And I think it's this one word we kidded about the other night. Attitude. There's an attitude against the establishment now that's so strong, they're willing to take a chance on this guy because they do not want to register, I agree with the direction of this country. They didn't want to say that.
We should have closed captioning for non-Philadelphians.
Yes,
that means attitude. But in Philadelphia, it needs no further explanation. It's attitude. Steve Kornacki, while we wait for apparently Donald Trump in the ballroom of the New York Hilton, Steve Kornacki is doing a deep dive again on Michigan. Steve?
Well, we continue to get the vote in. Remember, we have not called these three states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton's trailing in all of them. She would need to find a way to win all of them if she were still to pull this election out. We can show you the gap here in Michigan right now. It's 60,000 votes. That is steep. However, look at this. Wayne County here. This is Detroit and some suburbs. You see there's a little over about 670,000 votes have been cast in Wayne County. You can expect probably about 150,000 more votes to be cast there. However, absentees are going to be a big part of this. So Clinton still could make up big ground there. Also votes to come in from Ann Arbor. So there is still a scenario here in Michigan. Let me put this in perspective, though. We're talking about these three states where she faces steep hills to climb if she has any chance right now. But think of it this way. Her gap in Pennsylvania right now is about 75,000 votes. You just saw it in Michigan. Her gap's about 60,000 votes, and her gap out here in Wisconsin is 75,000 votes. Now, there is not much left in any of these states, so the odds of her pulling off all three of those are exceedingly slim. But the difference between Hillary Clinton being president-elect and Donald Trump being president-elect, look at this. Could be at just about 200,000 votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Steve, can I walk through a scenario with you here for a second?
Yep.
Just real quick. Looking at these outstanding states right now, it seems to me like just looking at basic raw truths about who's ahead in the count that we've got thus far, we've got Hillary Clinton ahead right now in the count that we've got thus far in Minnesota and New Hampshire.
Right.
We've got Donald Trump pretty clearly ahead in Wisconsin and Arizona. Fair enough in terms of what we're looking at right now. If Donald Trump wins Wisconsin and Arizona, that puts him at 269.
Right.
Not 270.
Well, however, I should tell you, what you can't see on this map in the state of Nebraska, it's like Maine. They break this down by congressional district. We are not actually displaying the congressional district, so Donald Trump, in fact, has not yet won or been declared the winner in the entire state of Nebraska. There's a district around Omaha that has not yet been called. This is the district Obama carried in 2008. Romney won it in 12. Last count I saw, I had Trump leading in this district, so that would be the extra electoral vote for Donald Trump at that point. Hillary Clinton to stop Donald Trump from becoming president, it really is. It's ironic. We talked for weeks, months maybe. Donald Trump, he needs an inside straight. He needs a royal flush. All of these poker terms for that sort of 1 in a million hand. That's the position Hillary Clinton's in right now. Sweep them. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And I showed you the gaps in them.
Yeah, or Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Omaha. Is her other path right now? I mean, her paths, like I say right now, they're deer tracks. Deer tracks.
And a draft choice, promising running back.
Yeah, and you can't have those faithless electors from Washington State either, by the way.
We just got this collection of kind of photocopies of selected front pages tomorrow, and while newspapers for the print edition have to get something on the front page and declare a lid on that day's news, race for the presidency hangs on tally in a handful of states is about the kindest way to put what we have witnessed tonight, which could also be called a prairie fire. That is the most benign way to state the story we have been chronicling tonight.
Here's Boston Globe. Suspense to the finish.
Yeah,
Trump surpasses expectation, tops Clinton in several crucial states, pulls ahead in others as harsh contest
it's the fear of Dewey beats Truman. They're scared to death. The headline is definitive at
the
this
newspaper
point.
Chris Matthews calls the Philadelphia Inquirer has Trump ahead, which is probably the most plainly accurate headline of them all.
We still have print newspapers. They have to put ink to paper at some point. They've got to commit, and this is how they are committing.
Front page of the Inquirer.
Meanwhile, we're just looking at the lower right-hand part of your screen there. Dow Jones futures down over 500. We've seen that number go from 200 to 300 to 500 to 700, approaching 800 at one point tonight. This is looking ahead again at what's going to happen when the markets open. The markets have been, frankly, for lack of a better term, freaking out every time it looks like Donald Trump might have a shot at the presidency. It'll be a global market shock tomorrow if he gets, actually, if things are just the way they are now and they don't change at all, let alone if he does get even closer to this or goes over the top tonight.
Can I just offer one contrast to those slightly understated headlines?
Yes, Casey Hunt.
What is going on at the Clinton headquarters right now, backstage, which is kind of a celebrity reflection, if you will, of what's going on among Hillary Clinton supporters. I'm told Lady Gaga is in tears. Cher is in tears. Katy Perry was supposed to sing the national anthem in this kind of surprise start. She didn't. She had a stand-in instead. I think, they had planned, and you really can understand the degree to which they deeply believed that they were going to win this election.
Look at the infrastructure around tonight. Look at that event, the staging, the venue, the talent backstage, all of it.
The napkins
from the napkins.
That's your Hillary napkin from the.
It was a souvenir I saved because I thought, hey, this might be the president.
You know what? I've still got my John Kerry tchotchkes from 2004. It got to be said. I
have a lot from Governor Romney's campaign too.
I've got Romney Ryan stuff up the wazoo. I can hook you up.
It cannot be overstated the magnitude of this political story.
Oh,
it cannot. There is no. We don't have the words
to
explain this.
Compare this to.
But you do, James, because a few moments ago you alluded very kindly to what was missing in the Clinton campaign. If this goes the way we think, and it goes back to what you guys did so effectively in '92, which is it's the economy, stupid. And don't forget health care. You did it over and over again. You knew why the Clintons were running. They weren't ambition, of course, but they had a plan. They were going to store the economic growth of the country, and that was a message that people liked.
It is going to be second guess. I have a lot of friends over there. I know a lot of people that had real problems with it. But they actually thought that the GOTV effort and the temperament would be sufficient to get you across the goal line. And she, by nature, she had a lot of different, position papers. She thought things out. She is a person who believes deeply in preparation, hard work. Collaboration, and that there are smart policies that you can do that can help make people's lives better. and, you know, be it infrastructure programs, access to job training or education or things to deal with sexism or racism or other problems we have. That's what she really believes. That's who she really was. And, you know, so that's when you run for president, that's what it was. And Trump, and she doesn't, I have no doubt that she doesn't think Trump knows anything. He doesn't prepare for anything. He doesn't study anything. He has no idea of what's going on in the world and the country. And I'm very confident that she's right. And this has got to be. I really feel for her tonight. This is.
You know, she won every debate by all standards.
Everything.
Every debate.
Yep. Everything.
Every debate. She had the best ad campaign, the best ground game. This is a shot against meritocracy, I think, because she merited everything. And the normal way you standardize these things, she did what she's supposed to do to win. And Trump came in around the corner. Well, we're going to study this for a while, I think.
Well, wow. Try the Civil War. Ken Burns film on this.
First of all, I don't think we should overlook the human element here either if Hillary Clinton does win this. I mean, this is potentially, it's a devastating end. And I know, you've been so close to them. I wonder what the president is saying to her now as she is kind of trying to process this and deal with it.
And, I'm thinking about President Obama, too. I mean, to have the first African-American president succeeded by a guy who was endorsed by the KKK is, a guy who had his campaign manager, as his campaign CEO, somebody who says, I run the website for the alt-right, which defines itself as in white nationalist terms. Yeah. For them to get that edgy on white racial animus. And have that be the succession to the first black president.
A lot of people a lot of African American people, Latino people, Muslim people, whatever, feel like, the country just told me exactly what they thought of me.
Yep.
And I mean, there's going to be, or people like myself who have who believe in a pluralistic nation that, it's a sort of, there are actually people who really believe that the strength lies in our pluralism.
Right, that it makes us better.
It makes us a better country. It is a devastating. I mean, my daughter came down from college, and a lot of daddies are having a lot of hard conversations with a lot of daughters tonight. I'll promise you that. It was unbelievably difficult.
Well, look at the number of daughters in that room at the Javits Center tonight, clearly there to witness that event. I'm also rewinding the last couple of days, James. Jennifer Granholm was on our broadcast. She was a passionate guest on Bill Maher this past Friday night.
She was. But
on my broadcast, I want to say Friday night, 11 o'clock, we were short on time. My last question to her was, if it was up to you, what would the closing message be in a bumper sticker slogan? And what she wanted to talk about was jobs.
Right.
Jennifer Granholm, Michigander by way of Harvard Law School, 47th governor of the state of Michigan. And that was not in the official closing argument, but she was all about jobs. It's the economy's doing.
Right. And there was a big discussion.
That's the disconnect.
And since, I always felt like my role is to be supportive because no one wants the last guy to come in and be the sort of the know-it-all. But and as the books come out and as things come out, we're going to find out exactly how big that discussion was and how people lined up. And boy, the second guessing here is just, it is going to go on forever.
We're hearing the room pipe up here at the Midtown Hilton. We have been advised that Trump himself will take the stage. We don't know that for sure, but the room is reacting to something. We also don't know what Donald Trump will say, if this will be a victory speech or what.
There is a report out there that a call has been placed from Clinton to Trump. We do not have independent confirmation of that. But the big screen in this ballroom has clearly broadcast something that has gone over big league with the Trump supporters.
And, and as we get to this point of the night, I think it's also, James, as you were saying, it's hard to overstate the political import of what this is. It's also hard to overstate the difference in this kind of candidate in what Donald Trump has proposed doing. I mean, there has never been anyone in national public life who has proposed banning members of a particular religion from this country. That's never happened in mainstream public life, let alone from an American president. This is as what Donald Trump is offering in terms of policy is as radical a departure from normal American politics as anything that has ever happened in any of our lifetimes. I mean, he has promised political vengeance for his enemies. He has promised to jail his opponent in this election. He has promised to restrict the press in unprecedented ways. He has proposed banning Muslims from the United States. Even if you don't believe it, he has. He's not rescinded that pledge. He has pledged to rip us out of NATO. He has said he will go meet with Vladimir Putin. He doesn't care if President Obama is still in office. He will do it before he's sworn in. He's promised to create a national deportation force to go door to door, business to business, and throw more than 10 million people out of this country. I mean, if he does any one of those things that he has promised to do, our country is about to face some serious crises. And so, I mean, buckle up. Your country needs you at a time like this. If he does any of the things he said he's going to do that are so outside political norms, the country is about to go through something that is going to be a radical shock. That's going to be a bigger shock than just electing him.
Taking in these scenes in the ballroom here, the New York Hilton Hotel. Chris Matthews.
Well, thanks for that. I'm trying to deal with what Rachel's trying to deal with is the future now, and what looks to be the future. And I guess what gives me some sense of calm is that these guys are still restricted by our Constitution, and that the Constitution is pretty damn good. And it does limit the ability of anybody to come in and change much. There's a leavening effect, a leveling effect to anyone elected. They have to contend with the Congress and the courts, and it's not easy to make big news. Anyway, we've got something coming here.
Yeah, I got to bust in with what you can read on our screen, the graphic in red. Kristen Welker covering the Clinton campaign. Kristen?
Have now confirmed that Secretary Clinton has conceded to Donald Trump. This concession took place in a phone call. We anticipate just moments ago. And as we are awaiting Donald Trump taking the stage here, that is the news at this hour. Secretary Clinton has conceded to Donald Trump. It is a stunning and shocking development, particularly for her supporters who waited hours here at the Javits Center to hear from her when it appeared as though the path was becoming too difficult. A number of them broke out into tears, started leaving early. Grief started to set in, one of her supporters told me. This is a political upset of huge, huge magnitude. Of course, she was holding the event here at the Javits Center, which has a glass ceiling, something that she was hoping to break through tonight to make history to become the first woman president. But it was not to be. Again, Secretary Clinton conceding to Donald Trump this evening. Brian.
The attention now shifts to the ballroom at the Hilton and the vice presidential nominee, Mike Pence. Reminder, a concession does not equal crossing the threshold of 270, but a concession is a concession, probably in light of some unavoidable math.
This is a historic night. The American people have spoken, and the American people have elected their new champion. America has elected a new president, and it's almost hard for me to express the honor that I and my family feel that we will have the privilege to serve as your vice president of the United States of America. this moment, deeply humbled, grateful to God for his amazing grace. Grateful to my family, my wonderful wife, Karen, our son, Michael, and his fiancée, Sarah, our daughter, Audrey, far away, and our daughter, Charlotte. I could not be here without them. And I'm deeply grateful to the American people for placing their confidence in this team and giving us this opportunity to serve. And I'm mostly grateful to our president-elect, whose leadership and vision will make America great again. So let me say, it is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated. Thank you very much. I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard. Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. We have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. It's time. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans, and this is so important to me. For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country. As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family. It's a movement comprised of Americans from all races, religions, backgrounds, and beliefs who want and expect our government to serve the people, and serve the people it will. Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream. I've spent my entire life in business looking at the untapped potential in projects and in people all over the world. That is now what I want to do for our country. Tremendous potential. I've gotten to know our country so well. Tremendous potential. It's going to be a beautiful thing. Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. We are going to fix our inner cities and rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, hospitals. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it. We will also finally take care of our great veterans. We've been so loyal, and I've gotten to know so many over this 18-month journey. The time I've spent with them during this campaign has been among my greatest honors. Our veterans are incredible people. We will embark upon a project of national growth and renewal. I will harness the creative talents of our people, and we will call upon the best and brightest to leverage their tremendous talent for the benefit of all. It's going to happen. We have a great economic plan. We will double our growth and have the strongest economy anywhere in the world. At the same time, we will get along with all other nations willing to get along with us. We will be. We'll have great relationships. We expect to have great relationships. No dream is too big, no challenge is too great. Nothing we want for our future is beyond our reach. America will no longer settle for anything less than the best. We must reclaim our country's destiny and dream big and bold and daring. We have to do that. We're going to dream of things for our country, and beautiful things and successful things once again. I want to tell the world community that while we will always put America's interests first, we will deal fairly with everyone, all people and all other nations. We will seek common ground, not hostility, partnership, not conflict. And now, I'd like to take this moment to thank some of the people who really helped me with this, what they are calling tonight, very, very historic victory. First, I want to thank my parents, who I know are looking down on me right now. Great people. I've learned so much from them. They were wonderful in every regard. I had truly great parents. I also want to thank my sisters, Marianne and Elizabeth, who are here with us tonight. And where are they? They're here someplace. They're very shy, actually. And my brother Robert, my great friend. Where is Robert? Where is Robert? My brother Robert. And they should all be on this stage, but that's okay. They are great. And also my late brother Fred, great guy, fantastic guy. Fantastic family. I was very lucky. Great brothers, sisters, great, unbelievable parents. To Melania and Don. And Ivanka. And Eric. And Tiffany. And Barron. I love you and I thank you, and especially for putting up with all of those hours. This was tough. This was tough. This political stuff is nasty and it's tough. So I want to thank my family very much. Really fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you all. And Lara, unbelievable job. Unbelievable. Vanessa, thank you. Thank you very much. What a great group. You've all given me such incredible support, and I will tell you that we have a large group of people. You know, they kept saying we have a small staff. Not so small. Look at all the people that we have. Look at all of these people. And Kellyanne, and Chris, and Rudy, and Steve, and David. We have got tremendously talented people up here, and I want to tell you, it's been very, very special. I want to give a very special thanks to our former mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. He traveled with us and he went through meetings. And see that Rudy never changes. Where's Rudy? Where is he? Rudy. Governor Chris Christie, folks, was unbelievable. Thank you, Chris. The first man, first senator, first major politician, and let me tell you, he is highly respected in Washington because he's as smart as you get. Senator Jeff Sessions. Where's Jeff? Great man. Another great man, very tough competitor. He was not easy. He was not easy. Who is that? Is that the mayor that showed up? That Rudy? Oh, Rudy got up here. Another great man who has been really a friend to me. But I'll tell you, I got to know him as a competitor, because he was one of the folks that was negotiating to go against those Democrats. Dr. Ben Carson. Where's Ben? Where is Ben? And by the way, Mike Huckabee is here someplace, and he is fantastic. Mike and his family, Sarah, thank you very much. General Mike Flynn. Where is Mike? And General Kellogg. We have over 200 generals and admirals that have endorsed our campaign, and there's special people, and it's really an honor. We have 22 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. We have just tremendous people. A very special person who believed me, and, you know, I'd read reports that I wasn't getting along with him. I never had a bad second with him. He's an unbelievable star. He is, that's right, how did you possibly guess? So let me tell you about Reince. And I've said this. I said, Reince, And I know it. I know it. Look at all those people over there. I know it. Reince is a superstar. But I said, they can't call you a superstar, Reince, unless we win. Because you can't be called a superstar like Secretariat. If Secretariat came in second, Secretariat would not have that big, beautiful bronze bus at the track at Belmont. But I'll tell you, Reince is really a star. And he is the hardest working guy. And in a certain way, I did this. Reince, come up here. Where is Reince? Get over here, Reince. Boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. It's about time you did this, Reince. My guy. Yeah, say a few words. No, come on. Say something.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you. It's been an honor. God bless. Thank God.
Amazing guy. Our partnership with the RNC was so important to the success and what we've done. So I also have to say I've gotten to know some incredible people, the Secret Service people. They're tough, and they're smart, and they're sharp, and I don't want to mess around with them, I can tell you. And when I want to go and wave to a big group of people and they rip me down and put me back down in the seat, but they are fantastic people, so I want to thank the Secret Service. And law enforcement in New York City, they're here tonight. These are spectacular people, sometimes underappreciated, unfortunately, but we appreciate them. We know what they go through. So it's been what they call a historic event. But to be really historic, we have to do a great job. And I promise you that I will not let you down. We will do a great job. We will do a great job. I look very much forward to being your president. And hopefully at the end of 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or maybe even 8 years, you will say, so many of you work so hard for us, but you will say that that was something that you were very proud to do, and I can thank you very much. And I can only say that while the campaign is over, our work on this movement is now really just beginning. We're going to get to work immediately for the American people. And we're going to be doing a job that hopefully you'll be so proud of your president. You'll be so proud. Again, it's my honor. It was an amazing evening. It's been an amazing 2-year period. And I love this country. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Mike Pence. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
As Donald Trump spoke, you might have seen the graphic change at the bottom of the screen after declaring him the apparent winner in Wisconsin, after declaring him the apparent winner in Pennsylvania. NBC News is projecting that Donald Trump has indeed been elected president of these United States as he goes down the line, greeting family and now friends, including New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Kellyanne Conway, and Steve Bannon.
The Trump world that we're seeing here, represented here, a lot of the key figures there. David Bossie in the red tie and the blazer with the brass buttons there on the left side of your screen. A famous anti-Clinton warrior of the 90s. He was one of these guys who was down in Arkansas prowling through the Clintons' past to try to find scandals about them. He was brought on board as the Donald Trump deputy campaign manager after Kellyanne Conway was brought on board. She was brought on board at the same time as Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, the publisher of a very, very, very conservative website called Breitbart, which was seen as being a sort of fringe conservative publication, but he brought a lot of the ethos of that fringe into the Trump campaign. That's what gave it a lot of its edge. A lot of Trump's critics and his opponents found that edge particularly unnerving, especially on issues around race and religion and gender. But they did what they said they were going to do all along.
And there is that song that has come on at the end of every Trump speech all this election cycle. You Can't Always Get What You Want by the Rolling Stones. However, tonight it appears Donald Trump has gotten what he wanted and directed sizable resources of time, money, and energy to get as he works the rope line for the first time as President-elect Donald J. Trump of New York. Chris Matthews.
Well, I did think that there was a message there, nothing attacking the media, the usual rants, none of the negativity we've heard from him tonight. I do think he was probably warned by whoever around him has an IQ that the world markets are going nuts. And his first job as president-elect is to deal with that. And I did think he offered some somewhat modifying thoughts there about what he's going to do as president. Certainly didn't suggest anything scary. I think he's aware as a business guy that he has to deal with the current situation, which people are scared to death of his presidency right now. That'll be his first order of business long before he ever takes office. And he's got to do it now. Like Bill Clinton, when he was elected in 92. We all down and watched his economic session with the Republican business types, and they all became somewhat enamored of Bill Clinton. They were not afraid of him anymore because he sat down with them and talked about economic policy, somewhat centrist policy. And obviously Trump has a lot more ground to cover there in terms of reaching something more conventional in terms of but infrastructure, he talked about that. He talked about having partnerships with other countries. He didn't talk about being unfair to them or screwing them in terms of trade deals. He did say all the right things, I expect. That's going to be picked up in the press this weekend, or rather tonight. But what a strange event. Seeing him with David Bossie, seeing him there with Bannon, and with Chris Christie, who's got his own problems. And certainly Rudy Giuliani, who said some strange things in this campaign about life on this planet, things that were just unbelievable. And Hillary Clinton has a health problem and couldn't serve as president, or that she's going to jail. I mean, think about the commitments he made about jailing Hillary Clinton if he gets elected. You heard none of that tonight in his victory speech. Let's hope that's a good sign. Brian?
Nicole Wallace?
Rachel gave me a present once. She bought me a website called Lose with Cruz. And I think I'm going to make up T-shirts for the Republicans that come on set with you that says, "Don't blame me, I voted for her." I think that Steve's analysis is right. He took down the Democratic Party and the Republican Party tonight, but he won. He has a mandate from the people. He won a rather dramatic and sweeping victory, and he didn't lose. Enough women. I was watching this gender gap all through the entire general election, and white women, I think older white women over 45, really did turn out for him. There was something about her, and I brought up Joe Biden earlier. John Kerry did this before. I mean, there were other people who had probably considered making this run, and the commentary all along had been that she might have been the only person who could lose to him, and he might have been the only person who could lose to her. And that was sort of the, and that's kind of the snide thing that pundits say that makes people hate us as much as they do. But it turned out to be the case with him, that she had enough vulnerabilities, that he somehow, by labeling her Crooked Hillary, she becomes the 17th person that he successfully branded. He started with Low Energy Jeb, and he ended with Crooked Hillary. And so far, he has run the tables in terms of successfully, negatively branding his political opponents.
What that translates into as a president, what you're identifying is a very key political skill that was never really identified as a political skill before he used it to such good effect. It is the kind of thing, though, that really doesn't obviously translate into how you govern. And the only thing we know about how he's going to govern is what he says he's going to do.
Right. And he's, the world stage is so different. I mean, has Richard Engel been down here?
Yes,
tonight?
he is.
I mean, he's at alarm would be an understatement to describe his state of mind. And,
Hoping to get him on the air
to the ground.
Yeah.
So, this is going to be a high wire act, and people are scared. People are scared because of the set of policies we've been talking about all night, his immigration policies and things he said he's going to do. But as much concern, I think, should lay at the feet of the fact that people picked him and that this is where the country was, and we so dramatically and terribly misread where we thought these things would disqualify him. We thought you couldn't say these things about Muslims. I thought you couldn't say these things about dividing us along racial lines.
John McCain.
About veterans.
Women.
There were inartful comments about PTSD. I mean, it was just gaffe after gaffe after gaffe, and it's more than taking him literally. I mean, I think people thought it was a window into a very crass man's heart.
Donald John Trump has been elected 45th president of the United States. The morning papers have revised their headlines. New York Times proclaims Trump triumphs. Outsider mogul captures the presidency, stunning Clinton in battleground states, and then some. USA Today calls him simply President Trump. Their subhead, in stunning upset, billionaire candidate scores White House victory. Wall Street Journal, in a very non-characteristic multi-point type, as we used to say, populist surge lifts Republican to upset. They also call him President Trump. Steve Schmidt.
We're looking at the president-elect of the United States working the rope line. Is someone who has just assumed awesome responsibility, and at noon on January 20th will take a 35-word oath and assume awesome power. He is the most powerful man in the world now. We have a country that remains very divided politically. He said all of the right things tonight. He was gracious towards Secretary Clinton, as he must be, as he's required to be. He reached out internationally, where, as Nicole pointed out, there is a lot of concern. He'll be dealing with global markets in free fall tomorrow. The next part of the choreography here will be a visit with President Obama in the Oval Office to be greeted by the Commander-in-Chief. Yeah. And the process now begins. That's gone on uninterrupted in this country since 1797, where we transfer power peacefully. And though, for many of us, quite improbably, Donald Trump has been elected president of the United States, our nation's fate is inexorably tied to his success at this hour. And, all Americans, including those who didn't support him, were offended, were appalled, should be wishing him well at this hour.
Eugene, the proper way to address him, according to tradition and not law, starting tonight is Mr. President-elect, though. Yeah. John Roberts will be the first American to address him as Mr. President. So if it doesn't sink in the intervening days, I guess it will in January.
This is going to take a lot of sinking in. It really is. I mean, as I kind of process this day and this evening, it's really hard to get beyond, oh my God, that this not only improbable thing happened, but I mean, just to be frank, it feels potentially cataclysmic, but obviously we have to hope that it isn't. We have to hope that that somehow this works out. We will have a lot of time to figure out how this happened and why we didn't see it, and the voters who came out who weren't detected by the polls. But I think right now we have to look toward this new administration and what is it going to be like. As Steve said, his first task was going to be dealing with the financial chaos that and anxiety, high anxiety that seems to have been caused by his election. And he's got to calm that, and he's got to put together a cabinet. He's got to formulate policies that are more than off the cuff. Gee, I like this guy, or I can't stand that woman, or Germany seems nice. You know, I mean, that's about the, no, I mean, that's about the depth and sophistication of the foreign policy ideas that he gave us.
In terms of the market response that you're describing, Gene, we do have a little bit of information about that because it's late enough now that with the time difference, the European markets are starting to open. At open, the FTSE in the UK is down 2%. France's equivalent exchange is down nearly 3%. The Italy equivalent is down more than 2% at this point. We had seen in American market futures, we'd seen these huge plunges, even to the point where a couple of different indexes were actually halted because they appeared to be in crash. They went into crash protection mode before they reopened. But now with these opening of the markets in some of our closest allies, you're seeing the world engage in a collective financial freakout about this news from the United States.
One of the things that the markets are freaking out about is what he thinks about trade, for example, and what he says about trade. And so this immediate, nosedive, that'll probably bounce back, I guess. But what happens over the longer term as people try to come to terms, and he comes to terms with a view on the world's free trade regime that is a radical departure from his predecessor.
And let's not forget post-war alliances and nuclear weapons. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who is in a unique position to judge world reaction, joins us a rare home leave visit here in New York tonight. Richard?
Well, I wanted to come here because I wanted to see the international reaction to this event, and we're already getting some. A British newspaper, Telegraph, saying, "Dear God, America, what have you done?" The German defense minister says this was a huge shock. The French far-right leader, Le Pen, congratulated Trump. I think that's significant because internationally, now the United States seems to have entered that camp of right-wing leaders, countries that are led by megalomaniacs, by narcissists, part of a trend that led to, frankly, to Brexit, what we're seeing in the Philippines, what we're seeing in Turkey, what we're seeing a rise of strongmen again in the Middle East. And that is deeply concerning. When you see world markets reacting negatively, tanking on the news of a new election, I think it shows a complete lack of confidence. And I think it's because they have experience, probably more than this country is, of what happens when you elect people who put themselves first and feel that they're at the center of the universe. This has happened many times in history, and it never goes well. Of course, he said all the right things tonight, and strongman leaders always do until they don't get what they want. And we'll have to see what happens when he's challenged.
Richard, you also are incredibly well sourced in terms of national security and the military, and especially the global reach of the U.S. military and our allies. I'm wondering if you're hearing any sort of response in terms of national security folks and military response.
I've been talking to very senior military people for the last several months about this issue specifically, and some of them were asking, can they continue? Can they stay in their jobs and work for this man? What happens, they wondered out loud to me, if they're ordered to go and round up millions of people and put them on trains and deport them from this country? Do they follow that order? Is that order moral? Some of them have been digging out the Constitution and going through it. They're facing very deep questions about what the nature of the military will be in this country under President Trump. And some were saying, well, they should stay on in order to make sure that the ship doesn't crash, and others felt that they just had to leave or are considering leaving. We'll see if they do that.
Donald Trump now famously said our generals have been reduced to rubble during the military forum. Lawrence O'Donnell has joined us out here. Lawrence?
I'm glad glad to hear Richard say that people are checking their constitutions, because the Constitution anticipated this. The Founding Fathers anticipated Donald Trump. They feared tyrants. They were overthrowing the rule of a king, and they designed a separation of powers government in which all of the true powers belong to Congress, that those can then be reviewed by the courts. The Congress has surrendered a tremendous amount of war-making power to the presidency after World War II, when it found war-making questions to be too politically difficult. But they can take those back. And so tonight we look at the Constitution and say, what does the Constitution tell us about what Donald Trump can do in terms of what he said he will do? And he can't do almost all of what he said he will do. I mean, just to pick one thing that he said tonight in terms of domestic governments, and that is rebuild our infrastructure. And I know Chris gets very excited when he hears Donald Trump say that. It isn't going to happen. He hasn't paid attention to Paul Ryan's House of Representatives. That's called a spending bill, and our infrastructure hasn't been rebuilt because the Republican Congress will not spend any money on that. And Donald Trump isn't going to make that money appear magically for this Republican Congress. So that isn't going to happen because it's a congressional power that we're talking about. And pretty much everything else he has talked about is controlled by Congress. And we will see what Chuck Schumer, as I've said earlier, will be able to limit this presidency to, because that minority in the Senate will be strong enough to filibuster virtually anything. We have Kamala Harris coming in from California as some fresh energy to the Democratic Senate. There will be others, and we will see exactly what the Democratic Senate side of the Senate is capable of doing in editing the Trump presidency.
Lawrence, what do you think in terms of your intense knowledge about how things really work in the legislative branch? What do you think about this vengeance-minded Donald Trump, if that stays the same about him, and he comes in as president and essentially does not want Paul Ryan to be Speaker of the House, may not want Mitch McConnell to be the majority leader of the Senate? How much leeway, how much real pull can he have if he wants to essentially overthrow the Republican leadership and install his own?
Virtually none, because the question becomes, if you don't want Paul Ryan to be the Speaker of the House, who do you want to be the Speaker of the House?
Some Freedom Caucus guy?
No, but right, and how many votes does that person have compared to how many votes does Paul Ryan have? The president will have virtually no influence on that. And so if he wants to make an enemy of Paul Ryan, he's going to discover that the Speaker of the House on a daily basis is more powerful than the president on all things except the targeting of missiles.
Declaration of war, nominees for the Supreme Court, and the like. Steve Schmidt, about the next period, the period between tonight, the declaration that he is president-elect, and Donald Trump placing his hand on a Bible held by the Chief Justice of the United States on the Capitol steps. What happens within the party you have called home?
I think it's a very good question. Look, the Republican Party remains divided. An insurgency has taken it over. The Reagan coalition died tonight. The orthodoxies of the conservative project that ran in a continuum from Goldwater to Buckley to Reagan have collapsed. The free trade consensus, the belief in these post-war institutions globally that have preserved the liberal order. Not for nothing, I think it's important to understand that we're at an hour where the last of the World War II generation is dying, that they're passing on. We're moving beyond a point of living memory from a global catastrophe that killed 85 million people, and the peace of the world that we've seen for the last 70 years is abnormal in the history of the world. And so we talk about undermining NATO, undermining the collective security agreements, saying that maybe the Japanese and the Koreans should have their own nuclear weapons, which are positions very quickly adopted by the far-right nationalist elements in those countries. There will be a coalition of Republicans and Democrats in the United States Senate that will work to obstruct that. But what we saw tonight is the shattering of a political coalition on the Republican side, as well as a massive repudiation of Clintonism and the Democratic Party. And so we now know, when Lawrence talks about Kamala Harris, we just saw the last baby boomer presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. There will be generational change now inside the Democratic Party. It's at one of its weakest governing points in the last 100 years. And so, you know, how politics shapes out from this, I think, is anyone's guess.
Chris Matthews, there was a powerful sentence in there. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Yeah. That's powerful if you're feeling forgotten.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, all but, well, not everybody. I never speak for anybody else, but I was wrong about the strength. I always saw, you know, I think about the Trump guy as an NFL game on a freezing cold day. And these are guys wearing jobbers, white guys, jobbers, rooting for a hopeless team usually that's going to lose, like Tim Russert rooting for the Bills. You know, just rooting for these teams. It's about their psyche. They vote they're for the Eagles or they're Steelers, or for the Green Bay, or they're for the Vikings, and they just get into this thing of. It's like that's all they got. It's juju. It's like in the movie, you know. Yeah. It's like six. What do you call it? Secret Linings or Silver Linings Playbook, and it's like they put all their money on this guy. It's a thing we're going to have to understand. And I think what happened, I think James Carville was here earlier. I just think that what happened was there was this movement, whatever you want to call it, maybe you have to call it that now, up against the liberal establishment, if you will, or centrist establishment, or Republican establishment, all three of them maybe. And there wasn't much there to offer an alternative. There wasn't much say, and that's why I go to the infrastructure, because I think in the end, whatever he does, whatever the Democrats want him to do in the end, it's going to have to do something to rebuild the country. We are in terrible shape.
With what money? That's
well, I know the argument. I know, because the Congress approved. No,
it's the way it works. There's a reason.
Lawrence,
they haven't
I know
done it.
In the end,
Republicans won't do it. That's
we'll
why
see.
they haven't done it.
We'll see what they do under him. My argument is, of course, the Congress controls the purse strings. Of course, it'll have to be some kind of public-private partnership. They'll have to sign some way of borrowing for it, if you will.
Roads aren't a public-private partnership.
I know. But there are a lot of infrastructure, airports,
tax money.
No,
that's
airports,
all they are.
Airports and things like that, and certainly Penn Station has to be rebuilt. There's so much. If you travel the world, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Europeans, everybody has everything rapid and modern, and we don't.
With tax money, all paid for 100% with tax money.
You're arguing about
the Republicans will not raise or spend.
If you want to argue that argument, I can accept it. That I will offer the positive argument that you may be wrong. That's all.
But the money will appear from some. This is a Trump dream you're offering here. This is the Trump dream of infrastructure paid for with money we don't have. And the Republicans will
he's saying that the Republican Party and its ethos and all of its morals, all of its strategy disappears, and they all do what Trump wants.
No, what I'm saying is, I'm saying this is that we go to war, we find the money. And we do it. And I just think
we don't. We went to war on a tax cut, and we didn't pay for it. That's another world you're talking about.
Borrowing.
These Republicans have ended that. That's
borrowing
not
at 2%
how it works.
isn't that hard.
But, okay, just to go back, though, those guys you were talking about who go and root for the hopeless team and because it's what they do. You know, Trump appealed to them by saying not just I'm going to make America great again, but that the problem really is those immigrants, and the problem is those Muslims, and the problem is those people in the inner cities. And, you know, so how does that's what we're left with? Does he knit that back together? Does he exacerbate?
Okay,
it's not generic attention
here.
I need to call a brief timeout because we are welcoming some audience from our NBC stations now that we have reached the really the start of the morning, the day after Election Day. We welcome those joining our live coverage, continuing here on MSNBC. We look at our electronic superimposed map of the nation on home ice here out back 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York, where the sun will be rising on the President-elect Donald John Trump of Queens, New York, and Fifth Avenue, New York more recently. One of the things we'll have to get used to, the Northern White House, I guess, will be here in Midtown Manhattan, unambiguously with his name on the side. Now a very highly defended Secret Service location. And Donald Trump and the extended family we saw tonight will be moving into 1600 Pennsylvania.
The suspense is over in a big way. There are still some loose ends at this late hour, this early hour now. There are still 4 states yet where we, at this point, don't have a call. Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, Arizona. That will make a difference in terms of the overall electoral vote. We also don't yet have a bottom line in terms of the popular vote. It is possible, as we're heading into these last calls, these last tallies coming in, that Hillary Clinton may have won the popular vote and lost the electoral vote, which has its own sort of, and you see how close they are there, in the national popular vote, less than 1 million votes between them, with still a lot of votes to count, particularly on the West Coast, and so where Hillary Clinton did very well. So we may yet see a division in the result here, with Donald Trump winning the presidency, winning the Electoral College, and Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote. If so, that'll be a remarkable streak for the Democratic Party, winning the electoral vote, but particularly bittersweet streak if in 2 of those presidential elections, in 2000 and again in 2016, they won the popular vote but not the presidency itself.
Katie Tur, who was along for all of the ride in this this campaign, is at the New York Hilton, where the crowd is breaking up and the flags will be taken down. Katie, your reaction after what you witnessed today and tonight?
Oh, what a long, strange trip it's been, Brian. I've been doing this now, as you mentioned, for 17, 18 months. Frankly, I've just lost track of the months that I've been on the campaign trail with Donald Trump, and truly have been a witness to what Donald Trump wants to call and likes to call a movement, and that movement coming into fruition tonight. What I can tell you is that from city to city, from crowd to crowd, the anger was palpable, the frustration was palpable, but there were also a number of crowds who were jubilant. It was kind of like a rock concert meets religious revival at some of these events. For the most part, these crowds were made up of white people, very few Hispanics, very few African Americans along the way. And as we got closer to Election Day, they got very angry. These crowds were not pleased. And the chants we heard and some of the rhetoric we heard, not just from Donald Trump, but from his supporters, really shocked the political system. Yesterday in Manchester, New Hampshire, at his penultimate rally, a man, while Governor Pence was speaking and talking about Hillary Clinton, a man yelled out, "Assassinate that B word." And that was something that I, even following Trump and hearing all that I had heard, certainly sent shockwaves through me. Assassinate somebody. And that sort of rhetoric wasn't, even though I was surprised, it shouldn't have surprised me, because we've seen so much of that on the campaign trail. I've tried to talk to the campaign about it, and I've tried to talk to Rudy Giuliani today about that sort of anger and where it goes and how do they harness it. Is Donald Trump able to do that by coming on stage and giving a gracious concession speech and saying that we all do need to work together, and inviting those who disagree with him to talk to him about it and talk to him why? Is that going to be the first step in what is going to be a long, hard process in mending the chasm in this country? Or, I don't know what will happen next, because frankly, Donald Trump is so hard to predict, and the campaign can't quite give a clear answer for that either. Also, when it comes to his supporters, remember Donald Trump has made some pretty grand promises on the campaign trail, especially for the first few days to 100 days that he's been in office. The other day in Gettysburg, he said he was going to sue all of the female accusers who have come out and accused him of inappropriate behavior or grabbing them in a sexual way. He also has said that, on policy policy-wise. He wants to build a wall. He's talked about a Muslim ban. He's talked about ripping up the Iran deal, ending Obamacare on day one. These are things that are difficult to do alone, even with executive orders. He does now have a Republican Congress on his side, both the Senate and the House, and something of a mandate because he's defied all political norms and defied politics, period, hasn't really taken with the Republican Party or the Democrats for that matter. Where does he go? And can he fulfill those promises? And if he does not, do his supporters hold it against him?
Katie Tur at the New York Hilton. Katie, thank you for that. Casey Hunt is here with us in our New York newsroom doing her own reporting. Casey?
Brian, I think one story that we haven't talked about too much yet tonight is what happens to the Democratic Party going forward. There was a lot of, angst and discussion of the Republicans in their autopsy and what were they going to do after 2012. They were never going to win another presidential election. And now we're waking up this morning and they control the White House and the House and the Senate still. And it's the Democrats who are left, frankly, with a lot of leaders who have been in place for a really long time. And I would argue that Hillary Clinton represents that same kind of vein of leadership, and not a terribly deep bench of young, dynamic people. There are a handful. There are some. Some of them were on Hillary Clinton's vice presidential shortlist, for example. But this is a party that's really, I think, going to wrestle with a progressive wing that has the energy and the youth and not a lot of experience, and this kind of honestly, what's left of the Clintonian Democratic Party that represented kind of centrism and NAFTA and trade agreements and globalization and all of these things that seem to have been soundly rejected tonight.
And Casey, let's talk about Mike Pence, who suddenly takes on so much power and prestige, yes, in a titular way because he is vice president-elect, but also as the veteran legislator with current contacts among other legislators in the Republican Party.
I think Mike Pence has a chance to make the vice presidency something that, quite frankly, it probably hasn't been, at least in recent memory. He is somebody who, as you say, understands these institutions. I covered him. He thought about running for president back in 2012. At that point, he was kind of the favorite of religious conservatives. That's still a way in which he serves Donald Trump as a bridge to a very key constituency in the traditional Republican Party that Donald Trump doesn't necessarily have a natural feel for. But I think he and Paul Ryan are likely to spend a lot of time crafting policy because, as Katie just walked through, part of why the markets are so uncertain is that he has talked in mostly vague terms about what he would actually do. And there are a lot of questions about how that gets executed. I think that the people that are going to help fill in those blanks are going to be Mike Pence working hand in hand with Speaker Paul Ryan going forward.
Casey, thank you. To our viewers just joining us or still with us, we are not ignoring the other elephant in the room still occurring to all the people for whom this news is fresh, and that is the total failure of all modes and methods of prediction, the total failure of, in effect, participant measurement politically in this country. No one had this right. And there will be time to deconstruct that as well. Steve Kornacki's at the board to tell us how Donald Trump won and was tonight declared the president-elect.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking back to when we were at this board a few months ago when Donald Trump got declared the presumptive Republican nominee, and we were asking the question that night, could Donald Trump actually get elected president? One of the things we were talking about was, well, if he does win, he'd probably have to cut a path we haven't seen a Republican cut before. And I just want taking a big picture look at this red-blue map. Take a minute and think about some of the things we're seeing here. First of all, Donald Trump is over 270. He's the president-elect. Take a look at Virginia. Virginia's blue tonight. This was a bastion of the Republican South for generations. It wasn't until 2008 when Barack Obama flipped Virginia. That was a huge achievement for Democrats. They barely held on to it 4 years ago. If you had said 4 years ago a Republican's going to win back the White House in 2016 and not carry the state of Virginia, that would have been unfathomable. That's one of those demographic stories we're seeing tonight. Check this out. Pennsylvania. Let's go right through the Rust Belt, the upper Midwest here. Pennsylvania has gone Republican. 1988 is the last time Pennsylvania went for a Republican. They have all gone in that state. George Bush Sr. in 1992, Bob Dole in 96, George W. Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney have all said, I'm going to be the Republican who flips Pennsylvania. It's Donald Trump. Michigan. Right now, Hillary Clinton is losing in Michigan. It's not official. We haven't called it yet. Michigan, 1988. Last time, George Bush Sr., the landslide over Michael Dukakis. Wisconsin, Donald Trump's won it. Last one to do it, Ronald Reagan, 1984 over Walter Mondale. How about this? Minnesota, Hillary Clinton's leading here. Notice, it hasn't been called. Donald Trump is within a point in Minnesota. Hillary Clinton is leading. It's doubtful Donald Trump's going to catch her, but keep this in mind. A Republican hasn't won Minnesota since 1972. Donald Trump needed the South. Donald Trump needed Florida. He needed a lot of traditional Republican states. But we have seen a brand new way of looking at and thinking about this electoral map. It goes through the Rust Belt. It goes through the upper Midwest. This is a white working class path to the presidency Donald Trump forged tonight.
Steve, thanks.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, the thing that I think we're all reflecting now is that all of us here sitting at this desk, we've all heard from people on the Trump campaign over the last couple of months saying, that Maine 2nd Congressional District, there's a reason we keep going to Maine.
Yep.
Like, oh, definitely we've got a shot at Pennsylvania. And we all went, you always say you've got a shot at Pennsylvania. But to see them take PA, to see them take Wisconsin, to see them within a shot at Minnesota, it's not true that everybody's polling was wrong. Theirs was right, apparently, because they knew to go to those places. There's a reason Donald Trump went to Minneapolis and told that city that they ought to be scared of their Somali immigrants this week. It's because he thought that he had a shot at spiking the white vote in Minnesota enough to take that state. And whatever else was going on in public polling that made that look ridiculous, their internal polling was right.
And Casey Hunt has word about the Clinton campaign. Casey?
So that speech that we did not get tonight, Brian, she, of course, declined to go over to her what was supposed to be victory celebration here in Manhattan. It sounds like we are going to hear from Hillary Clinton tomorrow morning, or I guess today
a little
in a
later.
few hours, but in the morning on Wednesday morning to hear what we presume will be a concession speech, seeing as she called Donald Trump to concede this race. We don't have any more details at this point, but we do know she's overnighting in Manhattan tonight, so we can imagine that it's likely to be somewhere nearby. Brian.
Casey, thank you. Back to Rachel's point, we heard all this on conference calls with officials from the Trump campaign. It was all there. It was countered by the Clinton campaign and by the knowable polling. Yep.
But then there's also all this countervailing information. There's the detail from his spending reports that he stiffed his official pollster to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars and had not been paying his official pollster, which made us all wonder about what's going on with polling in that campaign. I think one other thing, this will go down as an interesting sidebar of this election reporting, but one of the things that happened today, which I think was a little bit unnerving to all of us who are used to the way we handle exit polls and how careful we are with that information, making sure that there are no projections before all polls are closed in an individual state. This year, a few different media organizations fed what they called essentially real-time voter data, real-time turnout data, projected votes all day long, starting at 8 o'clock this morning in all of the swing states. I will say that in almost every instance, those numbers that they put out in terms of who was going to win those states based on that observable data all day long, those numbers were wrong. They gave much higher numbers for Hillary Clinton than what she ended up with, and much lower numbers for Donald Trump. So this was supposedly the democratization of data. This is going to be where everybody had as good of information as the campaigns, but that was also a failure.
Garbage in, garbage out. I mean, the numbers were just bad, and so you got a full picture of what was going on, except it wasn't really what was going on.
The official exit polls weren't bad, as far as we can tell, in terms of what the ultimate result was, but the other ways that people were trying to model a day of result was a bust.
But let's never forget, this campaign got hit with a couple of rockets that we've never seen in the history of presidential campaigning. In the history of presidential campaigning, we've had exactly one candidate who was under a publicly announced FBI investigation. Right. Exactly what? Now, that's a liability and a softening for that candidate no matter how the campaign goes. Then we have the director of the FBI make two very dramatic entrances into the campaign very, very late in the campaign, and his last entry into the campaign is so late in the campaign that it's impossible for polling to grab whatever just happened. And did something just happen to reverse the first effect of the first FBI letter? We don't know. So the idea that polling could track exactly what was going on with the FBI effect on this campaign is a real challenge.
Especially with the amount of early voting happening while that was going on.
Don't you think that a lot of those people who voted for Trump were voting for Trump? They weren't voting, against Hillary Clinton.
Well, the worry was always, does this depress Clinton turnout? Is it depressing news for people who were leaning toward Clinton? And so that's the part that you'll never know.
It seemed to me, we'll look at the numbers. It seemed to me that the Clinton side kind of got out the vote. The Trump side more people came out.
Some conflicting information tonight in terms of the total numbers of people that turned out. We don't yet know. Maybe it's starting to look like it may actually be an overall low turnout election.
What I think Trump did as a motivating factor was, you mentioned the way he used Somali immigrants as a foil in Minneapolis, and he wasn't talking to the people of Minneapolis. He was talking to the people of Duluth and in the hinterlands of Minnesota, who have a different idea about Minneapolis and what's happening there, and he did that with Chicago, the way he referred to violence in Chicago and the inner cities as a way of appealing to people who didn't live anywhere near inner cities. But he sort of used people of color as a foil during the entire campaign.
And the other thing the Trump campaign always understood is there's no such thing as a local event, especially in the Trump campaign. They're all nationally televised events. So when you're going to talk about Somalis in Minnesota, that's being heard in everywhere else you want it to be heard.
Here's the other thing that happened tonight is really the repudiation of the very famous, much discussed 2012 RNC autopsy report, right? And there was a vision, and one that I subscribe to, that if you want to win a presidential election, it's the George W. Bush model. You need to get 44% of the Hispanic vote. You have to outreach into minority communities. Dismissed out of hand the notion that there was a population of white rural voters that could be brought to bear outside their normal turnout numbers. It was just wrong. And so Ann Coulter and Laura Ingraham and, people have said, of us who hold that view, we're a bunch of losers, weak.
Rhinos.
They were rhinos.
Yeah.
They were right about it. But here's the thing. All of the candidates for the presidency of the modern era, John McCain, Mitt Romney, George W. Bush, if you said to George W. Bush, Mr. President, I think we should go to Minneapolis and, scare up the white voters with the Somali pirate, he would have thrown you out of the Oval Office. But all the normal boundaries of this race were off, and it was politics as warfare.
Yeah.
At a level that we've not ever seen before.
Chris Matthews, how come when Steve Schmidt makes that argument, you say, yeah, and when I make that same argument, you say it's ridiculous?
Which one?
This argument that he's using racism to gin up white vote in a way that it hasn't been used.
I accept it. I don't think that's the reason he won.
But it is what he did.
He did,
and he did spike the white vote.
And I think what you mentioned about that reporter or the columnist from the Pittsburgh paper about what people heard and what they acted upon, and I think they acted upon. They wanted a better country. And I want to talk about that in a minute after break's gone by. I have a big thought here. It has to do with that. But
I am told we're going to skip through the break.
Okay, let me. I think the thing that we've always counted on in our democracy, our basic notion of democracy, I guess, as it's modernly practiced, is that skill in winning the presidency would be applicable to being president. We saw this with Roosevelt, with everybody since in the modern media, or since Teddy Roosevelt, that if you have the equipment to win a presidential election, to put it together, to figure out what you need to do to win it, to be entrepreneurial enough to create this enterprise and then win with it, that would be the best way to pick the best president. And so here we are with a guy who's done it in a totally, perhaps awful way. Right? And my determination to be optimistic is to try to figure, is the talent he showed, call it talent, to do what he's done in the worst way, stirring up hatred, And all the other things in terms of identifying markets, finding out there's a market for anti-trade feelings, there's a market for anti-immigration, there's a market for stupid wars, and putting all that together into sort of a bouquet of politics, and then to somehow find a way to do it electorally. I mean, I got a call from them last night from Kellyanne. Are they going to carry Pennsylvania? I'm not sure they did have a really sophisticated system.
Asking you.
I don't think. They knew I knew the city. They knew I knew the area. But the fact that they were polling it this sort of way, you know, 1-to-1. What do you hear? What do you hear? That's pretty old time. I'm just going back to, I know we're going to disagree about some of these things, but I am just determined to find an optimistic notion here, which is there must be some talent here to be president because he's going to be our president for 4 years. So if you take the view, he's terrible and he's going to fail miserably, so why don't I get ahead of the curve and say that first? That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait and see the next couple of days and see, is he going to recoil everything he said, because it all was a game. All the class antagonism, all the ethnic antagonism, which bothers me. Is he going to pull back from that? The attack on the media, all the stupid stuff. Is he going to say, well, that got me where I want to get, but I don't need that anymore. What I need now is calm, confidence-building measures that I can actually have a chance of building this economy back up again. Because the reason I believe in the infrastructure thing, and I know he has to get it financed, he's going to have to change the Democratic Party. The Republican Party is going to have to help the Democratic Party. But do the brains that got this guy elected president tonight apply to being a good president? I leave it as an open question. I hope there's some connection. But otherwise, we have a dingbat as president. We have a guy with no ability to be president. It's hopeless with terrible values and incompetence galore. And we're just into doomsday right now. I'm just not ready to accept that sort of notion right now in my head. I have to think there's got to be a pony in this crap pile.
I think
there has to be a pony in there somewhere.
Somebody had to create the crap.
Don't forget,
I agree, it's his crap.
Don't forget he was a celebrity. Eisenhower, the last non-politician elected, won the Titanic struggle for the planet and came home a real-time celebrity for all the right reasons. This network devoted years of programming and promotional support to a reality show that was mold-breaking for the time and contributed largely to making this New York developer, builder, licensor, landlord, investor, successful guy into a global celebrity and brand, a brand.
That's true.
Who sells brand name licensed products with his name on it. Just one of the things we've never seen.
Let me put one better to you. Ronald Reagan, General Electric Theater. General Electric owned this company, and in 8 years he was on the top 10 of the television programs. He's number 3 one year, and he used that. So I think media celebrity, Eisenhower, of course, was a real hero. He wasn't a celebrity.
Ronald Reagan's dinner speeches around the country eluded and evaded the mainstream media of the time, who didn't see him coming as clearly in many of the same ways. We have 3 minutes remaining. This is the time for real wisdom. Lightning round. In this hour.
You're going to want to skip me. I will say the thing that if you want real wisdom, I don't have that to offer at this hour. I will say, though, that I do think that this is a moment, however you feel about this election, to keep in your hearts some of the communities that are not represented here on this set, who have been directly threatened by Donald Trump in a way that nobody in this kind of position of power has ever threatened groups of Americans before. And Muslim Americans and Latino Americans and immigrants, documented and otherwise, right now are in fear for what the country just did and for what our country means. Not just what Trump will do, but what it means that our country just endorsed him after what he threatened against those parts of our fabric. And that's a responsibility we have on all of us now, regardless of what Trump does with this power that he's just been given, against those parts of our fabric. And that's a responsibility we have on all of us now, regardless of what Trump does with this power that he's just been given.
Rachel, America is crying tonight. I'm not sure how much of America, but a very, very significant portion, and I mean literally crying. I've gotten texts from a college campus about a dorm that's just in tears. I know of another that I'm hearing from elsewhere. And And some of the people you were just talking about are crying, from California to Massachusetts, about this. This is a sadness. It is a mourning moment for those people, and it is a moment filled with fear. Filled with fear. And Donald Trump, thankfully, I don't think instilled any more fear tonight in his speech. It wasn't one of those speeches that had that kind of stuff in it. But he has a job to do. What we saw happen in the stock market is happening in the hearts of Americans. They are afraid. Donald Trump has to address that.
Steve?
He's no longer the celebrity apprentice guy, and he's no longer the bombastic, nonsense-spewing presidential nominee. He is the president-elect of the United States, with all the awesome powers and responsibilities, that will come with that office. And we've seen a side of him in this campaign that gives cause to worry greatly. But now maybe we'll see another side of Donald J. Trump as he gets ready to assume this office, and we just have to hope that that's the case.
Eugene?
Some of his supporters, certainly not all the people who voted for him, but some, took Donald Trump and what he was saying as a license for bigotry. I mean, they saw him providing an umbrella under which they could be as racist as they wanted to be. I mean, just to be perfectly blunt. He needs to cut that out, and he needs to cut that out now.
I was just going to say, I have this at my side, the Bible of American politics, the Almanac of American politics. How much of this has been just rendered useless tonight? And
let it be the first book we burn.
What new chapter have we written here together? Ari Melber continues our live coverage. Thank you, partner.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you, all our family members.
So
you doing in bed with that woman?
I'm his wife.
That's no good here.
Critics are calling Loving a masterpiece.
I believe this is a battle that could go all the way.